Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X-22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1316B and today's date is June 26, 2017 and the title of the episode is The Plan, the Plot, and How the Deep State is Being Outmaneuvered. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, Trump has been trying to get his travel ban through the court system, and we know that the Ninth Circuit Court, they keep shooting it down, so he decided to rewrite it, he resubmitted it, and now he's taking it to the U.S. Supreme Court. And they've agreed to hear arguments in favor and against the executive order banning entry into the United States of passport holders from Libya, Yemen, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. The highest court in the U.S. found that prior decisions by lower courts pausing the ban were not in order, and that until October, when the Supreme Court will hear arguments, the majority of points from the executive order, including the banning entry into the U.S. of all individuals without travel documents, including self-proclaimed refugees, can be enforced. The only exceptions granted will be to individuals from countries in question who have family or other connections with the U.S., such as employment or enrollment in proper educational facilities. Now, we see right now that Trump is out there. He's saying, well, as predicted, the Ninth Circuit did it again, ruled against the travel ban at such a dangerous time in the history of our country. And you can see at this point that this was completely legal. And we went over this again and again. And you can see that this was used as a political move against the Trump administration. And the deep state, which is intertwined into government, which is really deep into government right now, they were using their power to basically stop whatever he wanted to do. And they're continually doing this, but we can see that tide is now turning. Now, very interestingly, the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, he had some stern words for his colleagues when the court declined to hear a case challenging California's handgun law, saying that the jurists do not understand the importance of self-defense. Now, this case, supported by the National Rifle Association, involves a San Diego resident, Edward Peruta, who challenged his county's refusal to grant him permission to carry a concealed firearm outside of his home. Now, Clarence Thomas said the following after the other individuals declined to hear the California case. He said, "For those of us who work in marbled halls, guarded constantly by vigilant and dedicated police force, the guarantees of the Second Amendment might seem antiquated and superfluous. But the framers made a clear choice. They reserved to all Americans the right to bear arms for self-defense. I do not think we should stand by idly while a state denies its citizens that right, particularly when their very lives may be dependent on it." Now, Justice Neil Gorsuch, he backs Thomas and says, yes, we should hear this case. Now, a case needs to be approved by at least 4 justices in order to get on the Supreme Court's docket. And we'll have to see if this actually does make it, because, again, they're starting to see that, yes, the Second Amendment allows every single person to have and to carry a weapon. And it's good that this is being pushed through the Supreme Court, and they should hear it, and there should be a ruling on it. Actually, there doesn't even really need to be a ruling on it, because right now he should have said that they're actually violating the Second Amendment. But again, we're going through what the deep state has set up over a very long time, where their push was to remove weapons from every single person. And we can see that things are now starting to head the other way. And we can see that never really worked out anyhow, because every time they tried to push their agenda, what happened? People bought more weapons. Now we see that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, he arrived in Afghanistan. He is looking at Afghanistan, looking at what needs to be done there. And again, we have to look at this and say, okay, now, is this still part of the deep state where they're going to be bringing in these troops? If they are they going to be going after the Islamic State? Are they going to be going after the deep state? Are they going to be moving to allow Afghanistan to operate on its own, or are they going in there to control Afghanistan with more troops? This is what we're looking at right now. And the big question is, what are they going to do there? Now, we need to understand is that they keep saying that they're going to be coming up with a completely new plan, a fundamental change from the Obama administration's policy. Now, we know what Obama was doing. He was working with the deep state. We know they supported the Islamic State. They were never bombing the Islamic State no matter where they were. They put the Islamic State where they wanted them, and they used them in each one of these countries. Now we see the opposite happening, where they're not going to be using those policies. The Pentagon, this certain division, is going to be calling the shots, because we know that the Pentagon and many of the government agencies, they have rogue elements within them. And again, they're not all controlled. They're doing things on their own. And we can see this out in Syria. We can see it out in Iraq. We can see it in Afghanistan. And we see right now that they're pushing an agenda to basically rout out the deep state, to remove the Islamic State. Now, Mattis is supposedly going to Ukraine. Now, we know in Ukraine it was a coup d'etat. We know the U.S. came in, removed the elected leader, put in a puppet government, and this started the whole problem with Russia. And right now, the Pentagon has no comment regarding a possibility of U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis visiting the Ukraine, but there are some saying that it is scheduled, and we need to realize that he's going there for a specific reason. Is he going there to give arms to Ukraine, to go after the southeastern nation, or is he going there to try to reverse things from the coup d'etat? And this is, again, what we are looking at. Now, it looks like some congressmen have urged the White House to pull out from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty, between Washington and Moscow. Now, they've been trying to make this point that Russia has violated the treaty. Russia is saying no, it was the U.S. that violated the treaty, and they turned it around to make it look like Russia violated the treaty. But we can see that the United States, through the deep state, and we have to remember, Democrats, Republican, they are part of the same system. The neocons, the deep state, and a lot of the Republicans are not working with Trump. But we could see right now, they want to pull out of the INF Treaty. They want to get rid of all the treaties. And the way they do this is they make it look like the other country violated the treaty so they can get out of it. And this is what they've been doing. And Russia's saying, listen, we know what is going on here. We understand. And if you pull out of the treaty, the U.S. will be the country that violated everything that we had in the treaty. And we know this is what the deep state has been doing, because eventually what they want is a war with Russia. This is what they've been trying to do for a very long time. Now, United States Senator Bob Corker, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said that he's going to withhold consent for U.S. arms sales to members of the Gulf Cooperation Council until there is a path forward to resolving the dispute in the region. And we know this is the dispute with Qatar. Now, what is happening out there is many different things. It's not just one. First, Qatar right now is working with Iran, and it looks like they want closer relations. We see that the Iranian president, Hassan Rouhani, is saying that, yes, we want to bolster ties with Qatar. We also see Qatar has eased restrictions for Russians entering the country. Now, we need to think about what is happening here and look at all the different agendas. We see that Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and the rest have called out Qatar and said, you need to stop supporting the terrorists. Well, at this point, they don't need the terrorist groups anymore because they are now being beat in Syria. And we can see that the Trump administration, they're actually going to be going after the terrorist groups. They know who supports them. They know who funds them. They know it's the deep state. And this is why they keep saying that we're going to go off on a different plan right now than what Obama had. So let's think about this for a second. The reason they always wanted Syria is to build a pipeline through Syria into Europe. The pipeline was going to originate in Qatar. Now we have Russia working with Turkey, and they're going to be building the Turkish pipeline, which has already started, going to be completed. One of the pipes is going to be completed in 2018. So there's a race against time. In Syria, we see that Russia, the Iranian forces, the Syrian forces, they are decimating the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Al-Sham, and moderate rebels. They are liberating more and more towns, and they're pushing east and south. We see that the United States has lost the border to the Syrian government and the Iraqi government, which it's their border. And we see the deep state, they're trying to hold on to their piece of land, the land that they will use to build that pipeline. Now remember, their plan was eventually to go into Iran. So with this whole thing with Qatar right now, the deep state on one hand is trying to start the war and trying to get to Iran to finish their deal here. The deal they had was, or I should say their plan was to basically go into Syria and eventually end up in Iran and control the Middle East. For some reason, they're still sticking to this goal. Trump's administration plan is to basically get the deep state in Qatar, get the terrorists and the camps out of Qatar, and push Qatar away from these other Middle Eastern countries. Because if it moves closer to Iran and to Russia, there is no pipeline. Now let's go with that. Let's go with Qatar right now being moved away from Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the deep state. They can no longer use Qatar to build that pipeline. If they can't build the pipeline, there's no reason to split up Syria. If the Islamic State is completely wiped out of Syria, there's no justification for the U.S. to be in Syria. There's no justification to split up Syria. This is the plan. Will it work? We don't know. We're watching it unfold right in front of our eyes. This is the different agendas that are going on right now. And we have to remember, the Trump administration most likely is working with China, working with Russia, working with other countries to do all of this. And remember, they're battling the deep state at the same time. And you can see they're trying to box them in and make a push where they have no alternative but to say, okay, we don't need to split up Syria. We can't be in Syria anymore. And they're trying to do this, but we have to see how this all plays out, because we know the deep state, they don't play nicely. They use events. They push their agenda. They'll blow things up. They'll create events wherever they have to get what they want. We see Israel right now is still pushing the agenda, supporting Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, the moderate rebels out in the south. We see the Syrian armed forces. They are battling Israel in the Golan Heights right now. So we have clashes all over the place, and there's heavy clashes going on between the pro-government forces and the Syrian Arab Army, the National Defense Forces, and everything is happening all at once. So we can see that things are really being played out right in front of us. There's a battle between what Trump is doing and the deep state, and you can see it all happening right in front of us. Now, something very interestingly, since Russia, since Syria has liberated and cleared out many cities, towns, villages, provinces, we see right now that tens of thousands of Syrians have been lining up at the border to return to the liberated areas in Syria. Now, there are thousands upon thousands of individuals who want to return. Actually, they're estimating about 111,000 Syrians who crossed back into Syria from Turkey. And we can see at this point that people are now ready to return because the Islamic State has been cleared out of many of these areas. And as more and more of these areas are being cleared out, you're going to see more of these individuals come back. So this is what really needs to happen. We don't need to accept all these refugees. We have to remember the reason why we have all these refugees is because of the deep state, what United States deep state has done over the years to Somalia, Sudan, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, and Syria, Ukraine, This is where all the refugees came from. If we let these people have their countries back, they would go back to their country. They don't want to leave their country. They want to make a life. As long as there's no war, they could live happily in their own countries like they did before the deep state went in. We see now that Al-Qaeda, well, they're defecting to Al-Sham. Now remember, Al-Sham was created because they weren't on the terrorist lists. Al-Qaeda was on the terrorist list. The Islamic State was on the terrorist list. So we see right now Al-Qaeda, a lot of the members there, they're defecting to Al-Sham because they realize what is happening. They're going through and they're getting rid of all the terrorist groups. And they're saying, well, no, you can't touch Al-Sham because we're not a terrorist group. We're not listed as a terrorist group. But Russia understands and they realize that this is the same exact terrorist group. They can rename all these groups all they want. It makes no difference. These are the same terrorist groups. Now, the head of the U.S.-led coalition, well, he just admitted that they've lost the race for the border with Iraq to the Syrian army. And we can see at this point that the United States does not control the border anymore. And what is happening right now is the deep state, they're losing a piece here, a piece there, a paid mercenary terrorist group over here, and is happening very, very quickly. And you can tell the deep state doesn't like this because remember, the corporate media is the mouthpiece for the deep state. And when you start to hear stories like Donald Trump is reckless on Syria, it's his most dangerous foreign policy folly, and when they start saying that Trump has no idea what he's doing out there, what this really means is that they are losing the battle in this area where he's not doing what they want. It's almost like when they had the Brexit and the central bankers came out and said, listen, if you vote yes for the referendum, the entire economic system in the UK is going to completely crash. And that was coming from the central banks. This is coming from the deep state, where they're saying the whole entire foreign policy is a complete mess and he has no idea what he's doing. No, he knows what he's doing. The individuals in his administration that are orchestrating all of this, they know exactly what they're doing. They're maneuvering to box the deep state in. They're maneuvering to take control of the situation. Remember, the deep state has been around for a very long time. They've been pushing these policies for a very long time. And you can see once these stories start to come out, and this was coming out of the usatoday.com site, they push these stories to make it seem like they don't know, they don't have a foreign policy. He doesn't know what's going on. Yes, he does. These things are being done on purpose. Just like firing the missiles into Syria. He knew there was no chemical attack. I mean, think about it. The alternative media knew there was no chemical attack. He knew there was no chemical attack. This is why he warned Syria and Russia ahead of time, yes, through back channels, to clear the base of planes, soldiers, and they also had Russia shoot down some of the missiles. That's why a lot of them never even made it. This was all done on purpose to control the narrative, to control what was going on there, to show that he was in control. Now, of course, the corporate media, they went on like, oh, yes, he's doing exactly what we want. He's firing. He's going to be bringing troops. We're going to be invading Syria. It never happened. This was planned as a complete diversion of what was really going on. The same thing is happening out in Qatar. The same thing is happening in Syria right now. The same thing will be happening out in Afghanistan and all of these areas. Things are changing very slowly because, again, the deep state still has control. The deep state still has its claws in the system. And it takes a very long and very tedious task of removing them. And you can see he tried doing this in the beginning, and it didn't work out that well. But you can see the narrative is now switching and moving to his side. Look what happened with Comey. Look what's happening with the travel ban. Look what's happening with all of this. And we're going to see a lot of this come out as we move forward. We're going to see a lot of things change. Now, the only thing we need to worry about is what the deep state is going to do. Are they going to sit back and just say, okay, we lost this. No, they're most likely going to create an event of all events. And this is what we're monitoring. This is what we're looking at, because we can see right now things are going to get to a point where they'll have no choice. This is why we had this information about these cyber bombs in the Russian infrastructure. They're prepared and ready to start a war. If all else fails, they will bring us to war like they always wanted. And we could see right now the country needs to call them out on it and say, no, we know what's going on here. We're not going to war. This was a setup. And guess what? You're all going to prison now. It's time to clean house. This is what really needs to happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.